The results are in for the vice presidential debate, and it didn't go well for the Democrats. Plus, is there going to be another presidential debate? The Biden camp saying it has to be virtual. Trump saying not so fast. Plus, where are we now in the third, fourth, whatever wave it is now of COVID? We'll get into that and more coming up. Welcome, friends. Great to have you with me here on the Buck Sexton Show. And look, let's all just take a little victory lap. Let's all just let it sink in for a moment. Mike Pence gets an A. Great job. Great job in the debate last night. Honestly, I thought substantially more effective than even I had anticipated. I thought he was going to be pretty good. But this was a reminder that Pence is an undervalued asset of the Trump administration, at least in many people's eyes. This guy has been a steady hand, competent, solid, but also gentlemanly, respectful. He's a great yin-yang, a great contrast, counterpart to Trump because of all this. And Kamala was, how do we put this gently, a disaster. A disaster. But that shouldn't surprise anyone. As I've been saying to you, she wasn't strong even in the Democrat primary at all. Nobody thought that she was doing a good job then. But so how do you know that the Democrats are particularly worried about all this? How do you know that the Democrat Party doesn't feel like things went their way last night? Just by all the whining today, all the nonsense and the misdirection. He was mansplaining. They're saying that a lot. Vice presidential debates don't matter. Let's remember, there's sexism in our politics. Voters aren't ready for an assertive woman, and time to change the debate format. These are talking points coming from Democrats in the media that roughly translate to our side got crushed last night. Let's just pretend that never happened. Now, look. The polls are all still showing Biden ahead in a lot of swing states. And, if the election were held today, the pollsters would have you believe it's likely Biden would win. I don't believe that personally. I think that they'll be wrong again, or they'll all magically be within the margin of error, but always in the margin of error favoring Biden. That's what they like to do. Well, it's up. It's a 2-point race, but everyone thinks Biden's up 2 points, and it's a 2 to 3 point margin of error. No, I don't see that. The vice presidential debate, as bad as it was for the Democrats, is not going to change the course of this election, most likely. But this is, on the other hand, also all about just those small slices of the electorate, right? The voters out there who are thinking, look, I just want, and I don't say this with any disrespect or any judgment. I understand there are going to be people out there who are good folks who are responsible and, worthwhile, productive members of their community, wherever we're talking about, in Florida and Ohio and Michigan and New Hampshire and so on and so forth. And they're just saying, look, whoever's going to bring back the economy the best, that's who I'm voting for. I don't care about anything else. I understand that. I don't agree necessarily that's the way people should view politics, but I can understand how people would feel that way. And for that group, for those that are going into this looking for who would do a better job on issues of actual management of the United States government and the economy, I don't think you could have watched last night's debate and come away thinking anything other than, so the Democrats are evasive, dishonest, and incompetent. That's really what you're getting. And there's been so much effort from the Democrat-aligned media to try to convince people that that's not true, but you could see it last night. No, in fact, they want you to believe that Donald Trump is terrible. He's basically Hitler. His vice president is a stooge and has no thoughts of his own, doesn't do anything. They say all these horrible things about him all the time. But when they can't be the ones who are just writing the narrative, when they can't be staring into the prompters on CNN and MSNBC, doing the work of the DNC while pretending to be journalists, all the rest of us sit around and see what's really happening and realize that this is a weak Democrat ticket, folks. It's weak. It is. And that has not always been the case. And I'm not judging that from what I think or like. It's what the American people want from an administration. These Democrats are not going to provide that. So they're trying to convince people there's something other than what they actually are. And the biggest wins, and we'll go through some of the specifics on the policies and the exchanges, and there were a lot of them, and they were worthwhile in this debate because there were fewer interruptions, and the moderator wasn't trying to do an audition for NBC News because she was already at C-SPAN, so what difference does it make? There were some good moments, but the best single thing, I mean, the one issue where you knew that they had to push, and it didn't come from the moderator, it should be noted. It came from Pence. He teed this up. He followed up. He made it very clear. They will simply not tell you. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the DNC will not allow you to know, will not make a claim on either side of whether they will pack the Supreme Court. And that's just really all you have to know. Here's Kamala trying to dance around it, trying to avoid addressing the issue. Play clip 9.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
That's amazing. People should listen to that answer on a vice presidential debate stage for years to come about what you don't want to do as a politician. Pretend that you're being earnest, pretend that you're being forthcoming, and then for everyone to see, show them that you're actually just completely full of it. Let's have that conversation. You were asked a question. You were not asked a question as to whether you would like to have the conversation. You were asked yes or no. Would your administration or the administration you'd be a part of as the vice president, although really should probably be the gal running things. What do you think? Would you do this? Wouldn't give an answer. They will not answer. How can you trust a presidential ticket that on an issue as massive as packing the Supreme Court, which people brought up until now, even on the left, as FDR was threatening to do this, and that would have been really norm busting and tyrannical and undoing our system and changing the balance of powers and everything else. How can you get away with not answering that question? There's no reason other than they don't want to tell their base they won't upend the system and remake it in the image of the radical left. And they definitely don't want to tell independent swing state voters, yeah, we're full of it. We actually will do whatever we have to do in the pursuit of power. Whatever we have to do, we will do. And that doesn't sit well with folks, especially when you've had years now of Democrats saying that Trump is undermining our sacred institutions. They are trying to destroy and then remake our sacred institutions. By the way, not that they're really sacred either. I don't even like that term. But there was that evasion. Then there were other things. The lies that came out. Pence squarely, for anyone who is not utterly delusional, last night, Vice President Pence destroyed the lie that Donald Trump said that there were good people on both sides, and also pointed out that this is a man who has Jewish grandchildren, but the left keeps calling him a neo-Nazi. They think that that's in any way fair or sensible or acceptable, and it's not. I mean, they're disgusting. They are disgusting, but that's what they're doing. And I thought Pence was excellent on that issue. I mean, he crushed the vile lie about Trump's Charlottesville comment once and for all for anyone who's not suffering from stage 5 Trump derangement syndrome. And I wish the president had been able to lay into it when he was going up against Biden the last time around, but at least Pence got to it last night. We also saw what I've been saying all along, and it's just objective. It's just obvious at this point. It's something that you would pick up on very quickly. Kamala Harris is just not very likable. She is a product of California machine politics. She's never had to appeal to people who aren't solid left-wing Democrats. She's never had to appeal to moderates or swing voters. She just figured out who the power players were in some ways that were also unethical that no one even brings up anymore. But she figures out who the power players were and ensconced herself in the Democrat apparatus of California and just sort of worked her way up by befriending the right people, making the right allies, and running in the safest of safe places to be a left-wing Democrat, particularly one who's a minority female, because as we know, diversity, they don't just say it's a strength on the left anymore. I mean, diversity is a requirement for many things. California just made diversity, meaning racial and ethnic diversity, a requirement for company boards that are set up in California. You have to have at least one minority board member in California now. So Kamala comes from that left-wing machinery of the Democrat Party. She's never had to be in a really tough race. She's never had to convince people that don't agree with every poll-tested, political consultant created phrase that comes out of her mouth. And it was there for all to see last night. And no one could cover for her. There was no one to bail her out. And she wasn't very nice either. She's just not that likable. Now, maybe as a person one-on-one, I mean, I don't know. I've never met the lady. Maybe she's fine. I have no idea. But we're talking about her political persona. We're talking about the way that she is perceived by those who are supposed to vote for her to put her in a position of power and leadership. And truth is, she kind of makes Hillary look likable. Hello? He really thinks that people thought that Hillary was about as untakeable, unlikable as one could be. But no, I think Kamala actually was in some ways even more so, just because she hasn't even had to be through the battles. She hasn't even really had to be through the political fights. Feels like it was all kind of handed to this person. And now she's just been handed the vice presidency so she could be handed the presidency. You're like, what has she done to earn any of this? Why? It was a very kind of interchangeable prosecutor, and then made the right friends in the Democrat power circles and became the state attorney general and then ran for Senate. And now she's going to be vice president. Based on what? What's her big policy issue? Now, perhaps we're digging in too much on the holes in Kamala's record or just the lack of an impressive record. But also, she was a representative of the Biden ticket last night. And when you allow somebody to represent Joe Biden's political campaign and you actually force them to answer some questions or at least pose real questions to them, it's all very flimsy. It all falls apart very rapidly. And that's what you saw on that stage. One of my favorites is the issue of fracking, because you know where fracking really, you don't want to talk about banning fracking in places like Pennsylvania. Not good. Not a good move. So what do the Democrats do when they come up against a difficult position that they've taken in the past, now when they can present it to the full view of the American people? Oh, we'll get into that. Okay, look, what does the COVID-19 pandemic have to do with you losing your home? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You see, the FBI is telling everybody that cybercrime is up a lot, about 75% actually, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And home title theft is a cybercrime. Here's how it works. The bad guys, they find your home's information, your home's title, online. Then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, take out loans against the equity in your home. And you don't find out about this until you either get stuck with the payments or perhaps even a foreclosure notice. You've got to take action today. Create a virtual barrier around your home's title with Home Title Lock. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code RADIO. That'll get you 30 free days of protection. The usual identity theft services do not protect you from this. You need to go with the specialists, Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also check on the site to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it.
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act.
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not ban fracking. And she was very upset with the suggestion that was not the case, that the Harris-Biden team would ever even consider such a thing. Isn't that so interesting? Because here's what Kamala was saying during her run, which did not go very well, for the Democrat nomination. Play 12.
Practice. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah, and starting.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So now I understand this is where people would jump in who are the Kamala handlers and spin room people and everything else, say, well, she's now a part of a different ticket. But there's an even bigger problem, right? So she clearly, when it was the Democrat primary, was going to ban fracking. And for those who don't know this, I think it's worth everyone understanding that fracking is a huge component now of our energy situation. That fracking is something that's done routinely so that people have access, so that the companies that are taking this stuff up out of the ground are able to create this unbelievable American energy superpower that we've become in the last 10 or 15 years. So anyone who's saying ban fracking, you have to understand this is big. Hydraulic fracking is used, it's where you take a process of injecting liquid, 99% water and sand, tiny amount of lubricants, into shale formations that create small fractures, allowing the extraction of oil or natural gas from sites where the oil derrick and the well have been removed. More than 90% of American oil and gas wells are currently hydraulically fractured. 90% of oil and natural gas involves fracking. You're going to ban fracking? This is what it's actually a really big deal. You're going to ban fracking? You're telling people to do this? Oh, okay. Kamala Harris says I wouldn't do that, and now she's on Biden's ticket, so maybe she. What was Biden saying about this before too? Play one.
No new fracking. We are going to get rid of fossil fuels.
Well, like what about, say, stopping fracking and stopping new pipe?
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. Ends. Number one.
3 consecutive American presidents have enjoyed stints of explosive economic growth due to a boom in oil and natural gas production. As president, would you be willing to sacrifice some of that growth, even knowing potentially that it could displace thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of blue-collar workers in the interest of transitioning to that greener economy?
The answer is yes.
Oh, but he wouldn't ban fracking, Kamala says. These people are lying to you, my friends, and you know it. And I hope all the American people know it. There's certainly more policy to discuss, and I want to do that with you today from the takeaways from this debate. But first, can we just have some fun with the, Kamala is wonderful media? She's really, her core constituency is the editorial page of the New York Times. And if you're wondering who are the biggest Kamala supporters, people who work for establishment media, people who are big producers in Hollywood, left-wing hedge fund managers, they love Kamala. They think she's great. She's great. But just normal Americans, and I'm talking about Democrats now, they're like, nah, not so much. Sorry, not into it. And the media now has to do this whole act where they come up with explanations for why it was such a tremendously lackluster performance last night. Here is Fake Tapper explaining, trying to come up with a rationale for why Kamala got crushed. I mean, straight up trounced in that debate. Play 2.
I wonder if a woman candidate feels like she can't push as much or steamroll as much as, say, Mike Pence can for fear of seeming and offending some segment of the electorate. I'm not saying it should be that way, but I'm wondering if it is that way.
Yeah, I'm just asking questions. Like maybe it's sexism. I'm just asking questions, though. Just asking questions. Just floating an idea. Just putting out some analysis. I'm a straight reporter, man. I don't do opinion. You don't do cleanup on aisle 7 for Kamala's disastrous performance, because that's what that sounds like. Oh, she can't be assertive enough? She was nasty to him, to Pence, at different parts during the debate. And I think she thought, because of what we had seen with President Trump, that maybe she'd be able to goad Pence into the same kind of... Look, I thought Trump was a little too aggressive in some parts of the last debate. You know that. I've said that. Where it was just counterproductive for him, and that's what I'm really focused on. But now you look at the way that the media is trying to convince people that there was sexism involved here or something like that. It's completely absurd. The problem is when Kamala Harris is asked, are you going to ban fracking? She says, absolutely not. When both her and Joe Biden have been like, yeah, fracking is evil. Get rid of it. On the campaign trail in this election. That's the problem. The problem is she repeats the Charlottesville lie and is so sanctimonious and smug while she does it. And you look at her, you go, what is this? We all have access to the transcript. It's online. You can watch the video of that press conference. And you can also just think through, does anyone really believe the president of the United States, who wants to stay president, get reelected as president, that he's going to openly praise neo-Nazi? Of course not. They don't really think he did that. They just think they can get away with saying he did that, which has been the game all along here. MSNBC had a comment. There's more of this, of the sexism thing. MSNBC had a commentator who, there's so many of them, but he's got to hear some of it. It's kind of fun to hear that, I don't know what to do, because no serious person could watch that debate and think anything other than, well, Kamala was outclassed on presentation and on policy. That's it. Everything else is kind of a waste. Everything else is make-believe time. So let's get into some of that make-believe time. Here's someone on MSNBC, never heard of this person before. Play 29.
The things that jumped out for me were the way that he seemed extremely misogynistically dismissive of the other two women who were there in conversation with him. He talked all over the moderator like she didn't even matter, and then certainly had, a bit of disregard for Kamala Harris, and just kept on going, even with a calm tone. And I think that, he showed himself out to be in a very evangelical way, I'd say. Someone who is dismissive and disregards women. I didn't like that tone and tenor. I also didn't like the fact that he just lies through his teeth. The guy is responsible for 211,000, I think now, deaths due to COVID. He's in charge of the committee.
He's responsible for, how much stupid can you fit into one soundbite is a fair question you could ask me right now. First of all, the misogyny that she claims was there. Vice President Pence, I thought, was very gracious and quite respectful of Kamala Harris. He started out the debate by saying, honored to be here on the stage with you. He very clearly established a level of respect that I don't think was always reciprocated from Kamala, with all the faces and the pursing of the lips and the rolling of the eyes and all the things that she was doing when he's talking. That may play well with the MSNBC audience, but for people who really want to know what these individuals who are vying for a very consequential role, very consequential job, they don't like those kinds of little games. And But then, of course, this commentator at the end says that he's responsible for 200,000 deaths. Does anyone think that with a Biden administration? I just want to how many deaths would we have with a Biden administration? I'd like to know what the Biden supporters think. 10,000, 20,000. Is that really what they're going to claim? We're going to have, if that were true, we would have by far we'd have a lower death rate per capita population than any country in the world that has actually been hit by this thing. That's over 10 million people. We got 350 million people in this country. They have 20,000 dead in Argentina. So, or 330 million people in this country, I should say. Although how many illegals there are is still an open question. They're living in a fantasy land. That's not surprising, I suppose. Oh, speaking of fantasy land, that's a perfect transition point here to Mika, who just hates our president, just hates him. Who turns on the TV in the morning and goes, I really need to know what Mika Brzezinski thinks of something. From her deep expertise of having her hair and makeup done and reading off a prompter for many years, I really need to hear what she thinks. I just wonder about that. Same thing with Joe Scarborough, by the way. But I'm curious. I kind of want to meet the person who finds Mika insightful. Or Joe, for that matter. But here she is, living in a truly alternative universe. But what else are you going to do? You're a flack. You're a hack. You're there to do a job, which is to promote the Democrat candidate. Here is Mika. Play 30.
Oh, I thought Kamala Harris was fabulous. And she was disciplined. She was strong. Would be a challenge for any woman debuting on the national stage like that as a vice presidential candidate. She was reality versus whatever was happening on the other side of the stage, and she really used every skill in her toolbox to deliver a clear, almost near perfect performance. She was right on, spot on.
A near perfect performance. This is awesome. You know why I made you listen to this? I mean, there's a reason for it, not just because I find it amusing, although that's a big part of it. What she just gave you is what the lib hack media, that's a perfect, you could use that as an exemplar. That would be the boilerplate, the template of what you say after debate with a Democrat involved, where you're just going to say the same thing about them no matter what because you don't care, because you are a cheerleader for them. You are a booster. You are rooting for and actively trying to help them win. This is what you would have. This is what you would say if you hadn't seen the debate and you walked on set in the morning. You hadn't even watched a minute of it, but you're a Democrat. You're a phony and a fraud, and you got to support the Democrat candidate no matter what. So that's it. Oh, she was fabulous, disciplined, strong. He said this about anybody in the debate. What about her not answering critical questions and really not answering them? I mean, it was clear that she was like, no, I'm just not going to answer. Sorry. Oh, okay. There was nothing about her performance that was fabulous, and there was certainly no reasonable human being who, remember, reasonable is the caveat there, no reasonable human being who saw that and thought, you know what? Kamala was perfect. Yeah. So perfect that Democrat voters in the primary were like, we have no interest in this person whatsoever. But we appreciate that the New York Times, the Washington Post have tried to foist her upon us. Look, I do believe that for a lot of the journos, they have a nostalgia. They have a PTSD from Trump. They have post-traumatic, actually it should be PTTD, post-traumatic Trump syndrome or disorder, post-traumatic Trump disorder. That's what they've got. They can't adjust to this new world. They can't deal with this new world. And they also have this crippling nostalgia for Obama. And I think our media, which is diversity obsessed and deeply superficial, I mean, our national news media is full of vain, really a bunch of vain, self-loving, but secretly self-loathing idiots. I think that they see some similarities in in background, in presentation, in storyline between Obama and Kamala. And that for them is enough. That for them is all that is necessary, right? They think that they can maybe get back to the great old days, the 8 years of the Obama administration. And so they add her to Biden. And what do you have? Obama 2.0, a third term of the glorious Obama administration. That's, to me, how we got to this point. Because on skill, on the electoral map, on any of these other political considerations, you can't look at Kamala and think that this is really the best they could come up with. That doesn't make any sense. You know, if she were from Ohio, if she were the senator from Michigan, you know, I would think that there's a distinct possibility. But nope, it's because they want Obama term 2. That's what they're going for.
I thought that wasn't even a contest last night. She was terrible. She was, I don't think you could get worse, and totally unlikable. And she is. She's a communist. She's left of Bernie. She's rated left of Bernie by everybody. She's a communist. We're going to have a communist, and she's going to be, in my opinion, within a month. Look, I stood next to Joe, and I looked at Joe. Joe's not lasting 2 months as president. Okay, that's my opinion.
I mean, the president. Oh, man, he's calling her a communist. He's saying Joe's not going to last 2 months. This is when I love this guy. This is when he's really at his most entertaining, when he just decides to let it rip. But understand who he's fighting against. Understand that the other side doesn't even do this stuff in jest. I mean, they'll say the most crazy, untrue, absurd stuff imaginable, and if it works, it works. They don't care at all. Here's Steve Schmidt, the dumbest political analyst on TV. Not surprising. The guy ran John McCain's campaign into the ground so that John McCain could get absolutely crushed by Barack Obama. Not even close. And it was part of the picking Sarah Palin genius decision. So here's Steve Schmidt. He's not trying to be funny. He's just crazy. The thing is, sometimes these lib commentators will say something that you go, well, I mean, maybe they're trying to get a rise out of us, or they're being hyperbolic on purpose. No, they're actually just nuts. They're not normal. There's something deeply wrong with them. And here is Steve Schmidt, play 28.
And not for nothing. I mean, I don't think it's ever a good sign when a fly lands on your head for 2 minutes. You know, that's a sign all through history of sin, and historically, biblically. Maybe you wouldn't normally say this after it's only safe to say this, after midnight. But you know, a fly, he who commands the fly, has always been seen historically as the mark of the devil.
He who commands a fly, the mark of the devil. I mean, yeah, okay, what's he talking about? If you didn't see the debate, there was about a 90-second or so period where a common housefly, I guess you'd say, I think that's what it was, landed in Vice President Pence's hair. And because his hair is silver, it was noticeable. But it flew away. It wasn't a big deal. It was a little distracting for a second. You go, what are the chances of this? I was just glad that it didn't stay there the whole time. But, you know, Steve Schmidt, I mean, this is what they're grasping, folks. And they're grasping at straws. They got nothing. There was nothing to take from last night's debate that was good for the Democrats. And as we're in the final few weeks here before, well, I know Americans are already voting in some places, but before all of us have to cast our votes, except for the Democrat election fraudsters who are going to send in ballots late or figure out where they need a little more help. And all of a sudden some of those, you know, because that would never happen. Sure. Yeah. Anyone really believe that? But they're only able to win by lying about what they want to do. You know, Democrats have really abused the word lie a lot. They'll say that Trump lies when he says that, you know, he's the best president ever. That's not a lie. I mean, you might think that's not a true thing to say, but it's not a lie, or it's not an accurate thing to say. But they abuse words, and lying is one of them. they can't be honest with the American people about what they want to do. Right? If Trump says that he's going to build a wall and he comes into office as he has and is trying to build a wall and keeps getting stopped and stopped, it wasn't a lie when he said, I'm going to build a wall. That was his plan. They just got in the way of the plan. But he did try to execute on it. Democrats are lying to you. They're lying to the American people because they don't even want to do the things that they say they want to, and they won't do things that they say they will. So that's a pretty big difference, and the president points that out. Play 23.
He gets up and he says, we're not fracking. We're not fracking. He was fracking for 6 months. He was fracking. He was raising his very thin hand, and he was fracking. And now all of a sudden he's not fracking. Well, tell the Pennsylvania people that you're going, it's ridiculous. He said he's not fracking. That's all he said. And then all of a sudden he goes to a fracking mode. And how about her? She committed her life to it. And all of a sudden she's a fracker. She's a big fracker. They're going to stop fracking the minute they get into office. They're lying to everybody. They're lying about so many different things.
True. But they can't win unless they lie. What is Trump? I'm not talking about his record. When Trump says what he stands for, what he wants to do, we've seen for 4 years, he does stand for those things and does try to accomplish those things, and in some cases has delivered on some major areas. He also does not get enough credit for not getting us involved in a pointless war, because for my young adult life, or for my 20s and into my 30s, we couldn't stop getting drawn deeper into one war or into another war. So we'll talk about foreign policy more in the next hour, but the president deserves a lot of credit for that. Doesn't get any of it from the media at all. And Kamala and Biden, meanwhile, get away with lying constantly.